We're going to continue with Perek Alef Mishna Beis. So the Mishnah says, Shimon HaTzadik, Hu Haya Omer. Shimon HaTzadik used to say, Al Shlosh Devarim Ha'om Omer, on three things the world stands, Al Torah, Val Havoda, Val Gemilas Chasadim on Torah, and Avoda, and on Gemilas Chasadim on acts of kindness. Says Rashi, V'al Gemilas Chasadim. What does this mean, acts of kindness? Mavam Osav Ani, one who lends his money to a poor person, Shu Gadol Me'at Tzedakah, which is greater than giving him tzedakah, because it avoids him having to feel embarrassed from receiving that tzedakah. Furthermore, gemilas chasadim, acts of kindness can be done both with rich people and poor people, with dead people and living people, it could be performed with his guf, with his body, or with his money, as opposed to tzedakah, which can only be performed with living people, and it can only be performed with poor people and only with your money. And therefore, that's why Gemilas Chasadim is greater than Tzedakah. And also it says in the Psukim, Rashi quotes some Psukim, Ki amarti olam chesed yibaneh, because I said a world of chesed I will build, to teach you shebeshvil chesed ha'olam miskayim, that because of chesed, of acts of kindness, the world continues to exist. So Rashi seems to be addressing the following question, that perhaps one could have argued that tzedakah is greater than chesed. Why? Because presumably, when one gives tzedakah, first of all, one is accomplishing much more, right? When I give, let's say I give someone $10,000, so I lost $10,000 and they gained $10,000, as opposed to if I lend someone $10,000, I didn't lose $10,000 and they didn't gain $10,000. I just lost the use of that $10,000 for a certain time and they gained the use of it. But ultimately, the actual principal, the actual money itself still belongs to me and they didn't get it. And therefore, it would seem that there's much less going on. Giving up $10,000, actual giving it up, and the other person actually gaining it seems to be so much greater. Furthermore, when one gives someone $10,000 as tzedakah, the person receiving it doesn't have to worry and figure out where they're going to pay it back from. But if you just give someone a loan of $10,000, very nice, they have the use of it, but ultimately they need to figure out where they're going to get the money to pay it back, and then they have to worry about it and deal with that pressure. So it would seem that tzedakah, for these two reasons, is much greater than gemilas chasadim, lending someone money. And Rashi says, but the balancing factor is that tips the scale in favor of gemilas chasadim, because giving tzedakah to someone comes with the downside that they experience busha. They get embarrassed, as opposed to when you just lend them the money because you're not giving them a free gift. They don't experience that busha, and therefore, because it saves the busha, that's what makes it that the gemilas chasadim is greater than the tzedakah, in spite of all the great act that you're actually doing inherently in the tzedakah, plus the fact that the person doesn't have to worry about anything after, but it's not worth it for all that. That's outweighed by the fact that they experience busha, and that's the determining factor. So off the bat, it just seems a little difficult to understand. Obviously, we understand it's not a nice thing to cause someone else embarrassment, and certainly experiencing embarrassment is not a pleasant feeling, but is that such a big thing that therefore it's worth it to instead have to worry about paying back the money? And also, at the end of the day, what is the person accomplishing? The person giving tzedakah seems to be doing so much more. What they're doing is many times greater. They're giving up so much. They're giving up the actual money, and the other person's gaining so much more. So what you're actually doing seems so much greater inherently by tzedakah than by chesed. So how could it be that just because you're going to cause the person busha, not that you're trying to, but they're going to experience busha, that outweighs everything you're accomplishing when you do tzedakah? However, when we think about it further, it seems even harder to understand, because first of all, presumably this person who is receiving this gemilas chasadim, they're already experiencing some form of busha. After all, why do they need this loan? Because clearly they are unable to come up with all the money. Obviously, there could be different amounts to different degrees, but to some degree, they cannot come up with the money they need to provide whatever it is that they need, and therefore they have to come on to this loan. So they're already probably experiencing some level of busha. Furthermore, if we look in benching and Berachas Hamazon and Rachim, we ask Hashem, we say, we say, Hashem, please don't make it that we need to come on. We shouldn't need to come on to the present of flesh and blood, and not onto their loans. Rather onto your hand, how great it is, different terms expressing Hashem's greatness. Why? So that we shouldn't be embarrassed and we shouldn't be shamed forever. So it seems, as we say, both coming on to matanas basar v'dam, the present of a basar v'dam, and also v'lo yidei havasam, also to their loan, would result in nevosh and ikalim la'olam va'ed, to experiencing busha and klima forever. So while it's true that maybe you'll say that a matana, a present, carries with it more busha, but it's not as if the loan doesn't carry any busha, it also carries busha. So now it comes out that you have a person who was already experiencing some level of busha, getting a loan is anyways going to carry with it busha, but because getting a present will carry even more busha, so that extra level of busha makes it that even though giving them the present avoids having to worry about paying it back, and also the actual act itself is so much greater, but all that is outweighed because you avoid an extra level of busha when you give them the loan instead. Does that make any sense? Even to avoid busha altogether was hard to understand. But now we're saying they're not avoiding the busha altogether. They're going to get busha anyways from the loan. It's just going to be less. So that extra level of busha outweighs everything. That seems hard to understand. And perhaps to understand this, we need to look. There's a Gemara in Daf Kuf Yud Chesam and Alef and Psachim. The Gemara there recounts the following conversation between Adam and Harishon and Hashem. It says after the Chet, Hashem was telling Adam that he's going to be kicked out of Gan Eden, and Hashem told Adam that for food he's now going to eat grass from the ground like the animals. And Adam responded to Hashem. He says, I'm going to be like my donkey, eat out of the same trough. And it says he began to cry, and he was very upset, and he became inconsolable. And Hashem said to him, I see it bothered you so much. Okay, instead, as the famous pasuk says, by the sweat of your brow you'll eat bread. And then Adam was consoled, and okay, fine. And when we look at this, it seems very difficult to understand. What is Adam Rishon doing? Well, it's true, I understand that maybe it's not the nicest thing to eat grass like an animal and to be similar to the animals, but what's the alternative? The alternative is that if you want to eat, first of all, you have to now go and you have to find food available. And to get that food, you have to go through so much. You have to plow, you have to plant, you have to harvest, you have to process, you have to cook, you have to bake, you need facilities, you need all kinds of stuff. It comes with so much effort and so much toil and so much cost. Wouldn't it have been so much better to not have to deal with that and to never have to worry about food and to not have to go through all that toil and effort? And even more so, now that he has to go through all that toil and effort, he has to spend so much time to be able to get food. If he didn't have to do that and instead he could just eat grass off the side of the road, he would have so much extra time. What do you think Adam Harishon, the Yitzir Kapav of Hashem, would be doing with that time? He could do so much tremendous avodas Hashem during that time. Wouldn't it be worth it to be like the donkey, experience perhaps a little bit of busha, and okay, but look what you're going to be able to get because you subjected yourself to that level of busha. Now you have all this extra time and you could do all kinds of avodas Hashem. Imagine in his lifetime all those days, weeks, and months that he spent working the land, he could have instead spent doing avodas Hashem. How does it make any sense? Why would it be worth it to give up on all that to avoid this busha? And Rav Klibowitz, the Rashi Chavetz Chaim, he wanted to explain in Pshat this Gemara that the reason why it made sense for Adam Harishon to give up on all this just to save himself that busha is because a person's ability to accomplish in this world, everything we accomplish, the quality of what we accomplish is directly tied to the person's own self-kavod, their own neshama, which comes from Hashem, the Chayil Kal Kamimal. And when a person subjects themselves or is subjected to busha, that infringes, impinges, and otherwise diminishes and compromises that feeling of a person's own kavod, which stems from their Chayil Kal Kamimal. And now that engine that they have, the Chayil Kal Kamimal, which gives them this feeling of their own kavod, of their own self-worth, becomes diminished, and it impacts everything they do. And now everything that they do becomes diminished. And therefore, Adam Harishon made the following calculation. He said, look, if I'm going to eat grass like the donkey, it's true I won't have to worry about everywhere I'm going to get food. And it's true I won't have to deal with all the toil and all the effort and all the pain that comes from getting to the food, and I'll have so much extra time, and I'll do so much extra avodas Hashem. But it's all not worth it, because it's going to come out now that I'm going to be subjected to this busha of being like a donkey. And the impact that that's going to have on me is going to be such that now everything I do is going to be in a compromised state. And it's going to be on a totally different level. It's going to be so diminished. So it comes out at the end, I'm going to be much worse off. I'd rather instead have to pay the price of dealing with all that and worrying about where I'm going to get food and dealing with creating the food and having much less time for avodas Hashem. But now, the avodas Hashem that I do is going to be in a totally different level. And if that's the case, then coming back to Rashi over here, we can understand as well now that, yes, it's true that this person already maybe is experiencing some level of busha, and they're going to get an additional level of busha from getting the loan. But avoiding the extra level of busha that getting a present comes with is so critical and so valuable that it's worth it to pay the price of now having to worry about paying the money back and the pressure of where I'm going to get the money from. And it even overshadows the actual inherent value of what I'm giving up when I give tzedakah. I'm giving up the total money. I'm not doing as much when I give the guy the loan. But all that is overshadowed by the fact, but look what you're doing. You're avoiding subjecting the person to extra busha. And that safeguards their own self-worth, their own kavod, and their own chelka kamimal, which now makes it that when they do anything they do now, it's going to be on another level, which would have been diminished and compromised if they would have been subjected to that extra level of busha. Therefore, it's not worth it, no matter what the price is going to be. And if this is the case, then it comes out that, well, of course, we always appreciate how important it is to, not embarrass our fellow. We know it's not a pleasant thing and it's a terrible thing, and therefore we should always be careful not to embarrass someone else. But we see from here, not only that, how important it is to not embarrass ourselves. We have to be careful not to subject ourselves to situations where we're going to be, in some way, have our own kavod be compromised. It doesn't mean you go around demanding everyone to stand up for me. It doesn't mean that, but doing things which diminish our kavod or subject ourselves to embarrassing or such types of situations, a person needs to be extremely careful. Sometimes a person thinks, what's the difference how I may, act, how I may talk, how I may dress, whatever the situation may be. Okay, whatever, I don't care. You're right. Maybe it's not is it the most covered way of conducting myself? No, but what's the big deal? And we see from here that it's a very big deal, because to whatever degree a person is subjected to levels of busha in any way, shape, or form, it could have such a terrible, devastating impact on everything that they do. But I think we see from here even one step further, and that is, if you were to take this person, right? Let's say you have a person who needs $10,000. He hasn't paid his rent in 6 months, and he's about to be evicted. And someone says, "I'll pay all the back rent for 6 months, and you won't get evicted, and you don't have to pay me back." And the guy walks off into the sunset. So you would say, this person who just got his back rent paid for the past 6 months, and he no longer has to worry about being evicted, he's on cloud nine. Beforehand, he needed to come up with $10,000. He had no idea where he's going to come up with that money. Not only that, besides for having to pay that money regardless, he's about to be evicted from his house. He doesn't even know where he's going to live. And in a moment, in a flash, everything changed. Now he doesn't have to worry about paying the money. He doesn't have to worry about getting evicted. He is in a state of euphoria. Does he even at that moment feel any busha that he just got this present? The guy, you tell him, the guy's like, "What are you talking about? I'm so happy. I don't even know what you're talking about. This is great. This is the best thing that ever happened to me. Let's have it happen again." Not the part where he needs the money, but getting the money, right? He's in cloud nine. And yet, Rashi says that Shimon HaTzadik is telling us that while he may not realize it, and he may not even be sensing it, he is at that moment experiencing busha, and that busha has the power to compromise his own self-value, his own self-worth, his feeling of his own kavod, and his chelko kamimal, that now it's going to impact everything he does, which means that even if a person, for whatever the reason is, be it because of what's going on, be it because they're not sensitive to it, whatever the reason is, they don't even realize that their kavod is being compromised, but experiencing that, whether you realize it or not, still has that power to have an effect on us and to impact our own feeling of kavod and how we feel and our own chelko kamimal, and still therefore has the power to compromise and diminish what we're able to do, all our actions. And therefore, it's incredibly important for a person, whether they are sensitive to it or not, but if they see a situation or something or a behavior, whatever it may be, that in some way can impact their own kavod and not be acting in the so to say the most refined manner, they have to be so careful to stay away from it because of the devastating effects it could have on them. And Bez Hashem, if we can take those steps to safeguard our own refinedness and our own dignity, then Bez Hashem, we could ultimately come to serve Hashem on those higher levels, and through that come ever closer to Hashem and be zocher to all the good that Hashem wants to shower upon us.